This is the Inherit webinar on the needs of the visitors. In other webinars we focused on how to train professionals working as interpreters in the field of heritage. But in this presentation we are focusing on the visitors, so the target groups of the professionals we are talking about in the project. As with the participants in training courses for interpreters, we also think that the visitors of heritage sites can be considered learners. I know that they are visiting sites for many reasons, and I will come back to that, but basically learning is either intentionally or unintentionally also a part of their aim. And if we are talking about the learning process of a visitor to a heritage site or any kind of heritage event or whatever, then the kind of learning differs from the kind of learning we're talking about in training settings, in that sense that it's more informal learning, it is incidental learning, and it is free choice learning. So it's not that they come there in order to attend a course or to get a diploma in the end. They come for the experience, but in the end they will discover that they gained some learning results from it. If we look more closely at the reasons why visitors come to heritage sites, we see that some of them just come for the experience. If we're talking about heritage site, we can talk about, let's say, things ranging from musea towards natural parks, towards city centers of ancient cities. So there are many kinds of settings and contexts in which these experiences can take place. And people go there for the experience or for the activity. They like the entertainment part of it. Some of them go for good company. You see groups of friends or people who are working in the same setting coming to visit sites as a group because they want there to have the experiences together and share these experiences. Also, some people attend meetings in heritage settings, or they come to heritage sites for just for the achievement. It's like bird watchers. Bird watchers, they want to have all the birds in their portfolio, let's say. They want to have seen them all. So if you, for instance, are interested in the Hansa trade connection, then you want maybe to see all the city centers of all the Hansa cities. So some people are kind of collectors. They want the achievement, to have done it. Others want the fulfillment of visiting a heritage site. And also some of them actually want to learn more about the things they are visiting. They want to learn more about a particular painter, or they want to learn more about the history of particular sites, etc. Also, this learning process of visitors shows the same features as the learning process of the ones being trained to be heritage interpreters. So their learning is also contextual, it is experiential, it is self-initiated in the sense that they are not being taught, but they are there and they organize in a way their own learning, and the site and the guide facilitate this learning process. The kind of learning people are involved in heritage site, per definition, is active. They walk around, they do things, they may probably press buttons or open doors or whatever. And they go through the experience and make that part of their own, let's say, heritage awareness and of their own story, or they learn more about the stories of the ones who lived in the site or who worked in the site or were otherwise involved in the site. And in that way, the experience they go through becomes part of their personal self. To make that all happen, a heritage site has to meet a few requirements. It has to be a learning environment, so there must be a possibility to go through experiences that actually add to learning processes. It should be motivating to do so. So a heritage site that, let's say, is intriguing, that puzzles people, that makes them wonder about what happened, etc., triggers much more intensive learning processes than heritage sites that are just bombarding people with, let's say, information panels. It has to be a rich and meaningful learning environment that activates people and also helps them reflect on their experience and also on the learning part of it. So it adds to the value of a heritage site if it every now and then sort of allows people to harvest from this process of the experience and sort of count their blessings in terms of what did I gain from this. What does this imply for a heritage interpreter? It means that the heritage interpreter must be aware that the visitors are not only learners. They come for many purposes. And I explained about these purposes a moment ago. So they have to manage the expectations of the visitors so that people know why they are here and that the guide knows why they're here and that together they can work on meeting their expectations. The guide has to relate to the visitor. I talk about the guide, but also the copywriter has to relate to the visitor, and the site manager has to be aware of the necessity of meeting the demands of and the expectations of the visitors as well. An important element in the approach of visitors is also to choose a narrative approach. So not provide the facts and the figures only, but also the stories behind it. I'll come back to that in more detail later. A site gains quality if it offers experiences that involve all the senses. So not only words and sentences, but also pictures, smells, all the senses may be included, sounds, etc. The necessity to activate people may be shaped in a way that questions are asked to the audience, and if possible, that also dialogue between visitors are promoted. Not everybody may be happy about that, so I'm not saying that this should always happen, but in the conversation between people about what they share, about what they see or experience, in many cases adds to the quality of the experience and certainly of the learning. Heritage sites, as I said, can trigger all the senses, but another variety that may be brought in is in the kind of activities the site offers. So here it is worthwhile to consider how you can create a variety that would meet the expectations of all the visitors that might visit the site. So including children, including adults, including maybe elderly people. What kind of activities would be interesting to them and would be fulfilling to them? So here I already made a move towards this question: who are the visitors? Well, there are several categories of visitors. I was interested to see in literature that you have indeed parents with children, or you have a separate group with other needs, I understand, are grandparents and children. You have groups from labor organizations or industries or work settings. And they have all different needs and different emphases in the needs that they have. So it's very important, if you organize a site and you want to reach an audience in an interpretative way, that you are aware of the kinds of visitors you are meeting. To some extent you can be aware of that in advance, but also you can sort of identify the kind of visitors you're facing also a bit on the spot by asking questions. So given the fact that visitors belong to different categories, you always have to wonder, can we offer one arrangement for all, or do we have to sort of differentiate? Well, one way of differentiating is that you offer different arrangements for different groups of visitors. For instance, a trail for children, maybe a track for experts who are already, let's say, knowledgeable in the field the heritage site represents. In that way, you sort of choose to divide the audience in groups. I know of a museum I went to once where it was possible to visit an art exhibition either through a track where you got first informed about the artists and about all the works they made and the background of it, and then you would actually see the pieces of art, while other people with another style could choose another track and first see all the pieces of art and then get the explanation. So that was also an example of a tracking or streaming arrangement. Another thing, another approach is that you say, I take the cafeteria approach, a cafeteria model, an open model, in which the visitor, him or herself, can choose where to go, which objects to visit first, etc. Or you can say, no, then the variety of the visitors is an asset, and we are going to use that by creating mixed groups in which people can talk about the different ways and the different perspectives from which they perceive the things they are seeing and the experiences they go through. Of course, there's always a fourth option of making a mix of these models. I mean a well-considered mix, not a random mix. Now, my presentation so far focused on how to deal with visitors in a, let's say, organizational way, but now I'm focusing on another aspect of it, which is, and how do you then address them? And in the Inherit project, there we focus very much on a storytelling approach. And that is because stories are, let's say, the anchors to which you can connect the knowledge that you acquire, and the stories are a very strong vehicle of transferring messages to people, much stronger than facts and figures and just information. So we represent in the Inherit project actually a way of narrative thinking. You can make a distinction, as is shown on this slide, between two ways of approaching heritage interpretation or heritage education. One is much more looking on the informative part, and it's more looking like what happened here, when did it happen, what are the causal relations between the things that happened, etc. So that is very much about information. And the more narrative approach focuses much more on the intentions, the human emotions, feelings, etc. So on the story part. And in Western society, we see an emphasis basically on the informative part. So if you think about musea, you often see all these information panels, and to a lesser extent, you see, let's say, the stories about people and how they experienced it, etc. And we try to promote that in the Inherit project. A narrative approach is not only an approach as such, but it also requires a particular performance of guides, for instance. And so we consider storytelling as a professional performance art. It means that you have to be able to address an audience and communicate and connect with that audience. Another side is that imagination is a vital element in storytelling, both on behalf of the sender who tells the story and among the listeners who, given the presentation or the story, create their own images of what has happened there. So you could argue that the heritage interpreter orchestrates the imagination of the audience. And both the listeners and the storytellers are together creating, let's say, their story of the experience, and they are creating a community for that moment, even though they each go their way afterwards. The narrative approach has a few great advantages. One of them is that the narrative approach helps people to give meaning to the things that they see. The information as such is just data and will sort of be forgotten soon, while stories cling to your memory and provide you with an opportunity to give meaning what you see and what you experience. This clinging to the memory is another advantage. If you ask people to recall what they have seen about a site where they have been approached by, in terms of stories, then they find it much easier to recollect what they've heard there and to sort of reconstruct the whole story again and tell it in a meaningful way. But I think that in a way this is also illustrated by the fact that people, for instance, remember funny adverts from TV or in radio broadcastings, because they are all short stories, and these stories you can easily recollect. The emotional element of stories plays a big part in it, and the imaginative part does the same. So the facts, they come to life in a narrative approach. As I indicated before, it is very important to promote dialogue among visitors, because this idea of creating your own experience and personalizing it and be part of this narrative approach is not only an individual thing, but it's basically also a social thing. So we create our experiences together, we build our narratives together, and from that we create our images of reality and of our role within it. So we become not, let's say, a victim of the environment we see, but we become an actor in it. And in that way, heritage can also add to our sense of identity, both individually again, but identity, of course, is also a social concept. We create our identity by creating, well, in the total of our stories. And in that way, identity is a dynamic concept to which we together and the experience all contribute. That's what we are aiming for in the Inherit project. So if we summarize that in the end, then we say the Inherit approach consists of a needs-oriented part and also meeting different needs if necessary. There is a competence-oriented part in it, so we want people to go through an experience that has added value to them in terms of competence. It's an experiential approach, so it is not providing information, but it is offering an experience in terms of a narrative to make it meaningful, to personalize the experience and share the experience. And those components then add to the appreciation of heritage, to the benefits of heritage in terms of learning and of identity. So this is the end of this webinar on the visitors of heritage sites within the Inherit project. Thank you.